us.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Fagbemi, because you're a lawyer, and
yes.
It's interesting to realize that we made so much noise about it, and a lot of people went back to using Twitter, through a bypass. But it's been a month and some other days over it, and nothing has been said. People hoped that with all the suits against the government, with all the calls that people had made, even what the ECOWAS court did, that Nigerian government would have at this point, reversed the ban or done something about it. But here we are. I mean, 2 days ago we were talking about press freedom in Nigeria and the fact that free speech has been trampled upon by this government. Why do you think that there's been radio silence for so long?
Well, one of the reasons is probably because, Nigeria, the Nigerian government, and all of us, we're under the eye of the storm. And there are several issues that have to do with a whole bundle of Nigerian institutions. You have free speech, you have the judiciary, you have security, you have everything that is contained in the fundamental human rights that is being virtually challenged now. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that the Twitter ban came and a series of other things happened that bordered on people's rights. Take, for example, the security incidences concerning Sunday Igboho and Kano. I mean, those are extensions of rights of speech. And you will recall that the subject matter that required the banning of, or the removal of the president's tweet had to do with all these accusations and counter-accusations of insurgency. So for me, I think it's like, there are so many issues now that we have to grapple with. It will appear that the issue of the Twitter is just a branch in an entire tree that must be uprooted. That is the deprivation or the trying to gag the press. There are other two, you will recall that there are two other contentious issues in the National Assembly, particularly one having to do with the press. I mean, two having to do with the press. Now, all these belong to the same category. If they unban Twitter, and we still continue to have threats to freedom of speech, we still continue to have threats to security, we still continue to have, uncertainty in terms of the fulfillment of our fundamental rights, then unbanning Twitter doesn't do anything. So I believe that the population and a lot of Nigerians are trying to look and, our focus is more on the, at least I know, those who are inclined to the reforms and those who are in the civil rights movement and a number of lawyers, that I know want to look beyond just banning of Twitter. What enables a government to get up one day and make laws or make rules, out of the cuff? It's a violation of the rule of law. So what I'm saying in essence is that the banning of Twitter is a violation of the rule of law, a violation of speech. It could have been the issues the president wanted to address, could have been addressed to the courts, right? Take, for example, the guy in I think it's Borno State or Adamawa State, who got a 1-year prison term for being rude, or what he said to the president was deemed to be seditious. Now, that should never happen. You shouldn't use the state to protect your person when it comes to things like, speeches and utterances against your person. So they all belong to a whole category. And I guess that rather than spend energy on fighting Twitter alone, we have greater battles to fight, that if we win, the Twitter thing will be a thing of the past.
So Mr. Fagbemi, you're saying that we should forget about government ever reversing the suspension because they have, the AGF had come out to say that they're not stopping Nigerians from using Twitter. but he never really addressed the fact that there was a ban. Whether it was constitutional or not is not the case, but they're saying they haven't stopped us from using Twitter. So you're telling me that we should forget about it and deal with bigger issues?
I am telling you that the government is not talking straight and has never really been talking straight. We have had contradictory policy from this government. We have had contradictions, internal contradictions between ministries, between agencies of this government. The presidency has spoken by the left, and the president himself will speak by the right. The attorney general will say something, and you have other aspects. So you really don't know where we stand. But what we fundamentally know is that there is a threat to rule of law. There is a graduation towards some form of dictatorship, military dictatorship, of which the use of Twitter is a casualty.
Okay.
Now, it does not mean that we do not have people who violate, the rights to free speech or abuse the right to free speech. But the law provides for redress. And we are saying this government is not taking advantage of that law, but being extrajudicial, extra-legal. So we are no longer really under the rule of law, but more like under the rule of women caprice.
I will come back to you because I want to talk more about the rule of law and disobedience to court orders. But let me go to Nelly. Nelly, you're a journalist. As I know that you write a lot, you do a lot of interviews. I see your work. And many journalists may not necessarily use Twitter on a day-to-day, but then you publish most of your stories on social media because now you don't have to go to a newspaper stand to get your stories. You quickly go to Twitter and you get headlines for whatever national daily. And this happens across the world. But let's look at what the lawyer just said, that we don't necessarily, that we have bigger problems, bigger than Twitter, and we should be more worried about the problems that we have as a country. The fact that we have insecurity and people are dying every day. The numbers have become just, you just hear that 10, 100 are dead, and then you say, oh, okay. So should we jettison the idea of Twitter ever coming back? Should we also close our eyes to the fact that this is one of the many things that government has done without legal backing?
For me, everything is symbolic, you see. So it's all about symbolism. What does a certain action represent? And it's quite easy to say that there are bigger issues. And I think that's always been the problem with Nigeria. Every time that there is something to consider, we always say, oh, there's a bigger issue. There's something else to deal with. This is not as big as then we compare to the issues. And we forget that everything is a spiral and a reflection of the very next action you're taking. Let's look at symbolism, for instance. Banning Twitter, a space where people could speak freely and criticize government and the president, is akin to shutting down a newspaper because it has so many opinion pages and half of the opinion pages don't make you look good. And so you either shut down the newspaper, take it with your license, or you burn down the building, however you choose to see it. That's symbolism. Using VPN to access Twitter and then saying in a court of law that I haven't banned Nigerians from using Twitter, they can still use Twitter, meaning we can still access Twitter from the back door, is similar to people living in an area where they're locked in and blocked in by insurgents. So you're not allowed to access certain news. You're not allowed to speak in a certain way. And the only way you can do this is to cross the border, legally or illegally, to an area where you have the freedom to do it. Imagine yourself in a Kenya-Somali border area, and Al-Shabaab controls that region. And so your access to news and your access to verifiable information is to cross somehow to an area that is controlled by government forces, or at least that's free enough to access what they want. That's symbolism, and that's exactly what this Twitter ban is. It's all about symbolism. It's simply doing what you would have done so freely if this was military era, if this was a military space, and just trying to modify it to suit democracy. We do not have bigger issues. Freedom of speech and the right to be is one of the biggest issues. In fact, why people will die and we brush our shoulders about it, why people are unconcerned about applying themselves to the issues in Nigeria, is simply because we have never lived in an environment where we feel completely free to speak, completely free to critique and hold to question people who are supposed to be our leaders, people who are supposed to be answerable to us. We've never understood that dynamic of leadership. So there's nothing more important because it's symbolic. Everything is symbolic. I mean, give me an issue today in Nigeria that you would say is more important than Twitter ban, then it means you reduce the issues to a very reductive space, because now you're looking at it as an isolated space of capitalism and maybe an isolated space of millennials or generational divide and misunderstanding of what social media is. But we both know that that's not true. It's a simple case of an ego being rubbed the wrong way, and then you shut down because you have the power to.
Nelly,
you deprive people of freedom.
there are people who also are of the opinion that this is how we are as Nigerians, and you talked about it briefly. The fact that we made so much noise about it, like we were so certain we would get the government to turn, to take down the ban or, reverse the suspension. But then, I mean, it's 1 month plus down the line, and like I said, radio silence. We've moved on to other matters. We literally acted like it's not there. And we can also trace it back to other things. The MSAS, we made so much noise. We screamed, we cried, we talked about it on shows, and then boom, it died off, swept under the carpet. Could it be that these people, these politicians, these people who lead us, have over time realized that we're very sentimental and it doesn't last, it fizzles out and we'll forget it when they bring something brand new. And so they're taking advantage of that fact, and that's why we're here today. Could it also be that maybe this Twitter ban will never go away and we'll find ourselves in a situation where other countries like, other countries that I'm not in any way trying to talk down on African countries, but other countries where their social media space is controlled. Do you see us ending up there?
Okay, first of all, the reasons for me are a little bit of both, right? And where do I see us ending up? You can never tell where we're going to end up in Nigeria. I have seen, in my short time being an adult in this country, I have seen us, change mood. And by mood, I mean both economic, political, and social, environmental moods the moment a new government comes in. So we do know that the government of Muhammadu Buhari is not going to be here forever. It's going to come to an expiration point, and because of democratic rules and edicts, he will be replaced. And that's what's going to happen. Who will he be replaced by? And to whom do we turn? We don't know at this moment as I sit. I don't think you know either, Marianne. And so until then, we can tell where Nigeria is going. It's most likely that this is going to be a political weapon for the opposition party. So that might mean that you and I can just posit that we'll be back on Twitter again because someone else would like to look good on this mistake. But however, going back to the questions and to the instances you pointed out, the politicians think we have a short attention span. Probably, I'm not one. And do they think that we'll probably move on after a short time? Most likely. Do we really do? Yes, we do. And it's not a lack of concern. It's that we are just a generation that have been born out of the carefulness of our parents. Very careful, strategic dealing of Nigerian issues. Our parents, and most of us were born in an era where journalists were locked in jail, some of them killed. And our parents have lived through wars, and they've seen people who speak up against the government losing their freedom, their lives, their families, and yet nothing seems to have happened. No one remembers those who died. Take a look at NSAS. People died, and it's a political story now. No one remembers those who died. No one remembers those who's lost their freedom, who's standing in for them, who's taking care of the families that they left behind. And we grew up around parents who say, oh no, don't talk too much. Don't do this too much. Don't try this too much. Because there is a palpable fear, whether we're in a democracy or not, that has continued to be passed down from generation after generation. And that is why it might seem that there's a short attention span. I wouldn't call it a short attention span particularly. I think I'm going to really say that it's more of a disheartening fever. In essence, you still care, but then there's the depression of acknowledging that nothing is going to be done. So you will probably end up a statistic for something that will never change. It takes away the passion of it. But there are still pockets of people everywhere. There's you, there's me, there's the media, and that keeps reminding people, and that's what I want to say before I take a pause. And that's that we are journalists, we are the media. It's our job to remind people of what they seem to have forgotten. Nigerian news has never gotten to the point where you say, oh my goodness, are they still talking about this thing? Are we not tired? I don't see it. You see it when you listen to international media, they go on and about the thing. And it's not because there isn't any more news, it's because that issue is so valid. It's so important for their freedoms, for their democracy, for who they are, that they have to keep at it until they get some kind of resolution. And on that, I do not blame on us. We do not quite know our position yet as media, and we need to remember it, to keep at it until there's some kind of a resolution.
Interesting. Let me come back to you, Mr. Fabian. Let's talk about the issues that the federal government made in the first instance. Remember, they tried to, they said, in fact, it's not tried, they said that, government said that Jack, that's the owner of Twitter, the CEO of Twitter, was trying to unseat the president through the NSAS protest. That's one of the allegations. Now, there are also pundits who seem to agree with the government that Twitter has had a close shove with many other countries, and that there's so many other countries, even in the West, who are trying to regulate these social media, and that there is some political undertone to all of this, that it's not just about the ego of Mr. President that was bruised. So I want to ask you, as a lawyer, as someone who sees all the things that happen from a certain prism, is there a political tone to this? Because government has also tried to say that they, were trying to get some form of payment of taxes, to earn taxes from Twitter, which they claim they were going to be having conversations with them for. Hopefully we will get them to pay for the operations here in Nigeria. But looking at all of that, summing it all up, is there really a political undertone? Could Jack be trying to influence governments through his social media platform?
Well, the only politicking I've seen is the one that's coming from government, because the government massively has used Twitter as an instrument. And the issue that brought about this was the government's own handling of a number of things. What was the president's response to people who are agitating for self-determination? And what's his response compared to people who are actually shooting down planes and shooting our men in the armed forces and capturing children? So for me, I don't see, Twitter is doing its business. Jack is doing his business. He's in business. He's making his money. If we want to talk economics, and we say, okay, let's make a bit out of that money and see how we can charge Twitter and all those social handles a bit of, something, for their entry to the Nigerian space, that's a totally different matter. So I don't want us to mix apples and oranges. I think the government is being a bit smarter by half, by saying that, because they're the ones playing politics. But I'd like to just make a slight correction. And maybe I came across as saying that Twitter, the banning of Twitter was small, and that we shouldn't sustain it. No, that's not exactly what I was saying. And I do understand Nelly, and I do agree with her, and I want to assure that I am on that same page. What I'm saying is that, there are fundamental things that led to or created the enabling environment for a president to ban Twitter because of his ego. The same reason behind the banning of Twitter has a lot to do with NSAS struggle. For me, the NSAS struggle was inconclusive on our own part. It made its impact, but we could have taken it further. Why didn't we take it further? What was missing?
I'm sorry, how do we take it further if people were being shot at? And the government, we can't even get the government to be accountable to the bullets that were being shot in the air. Where do you start to take it further?
Can I? Yeah. You see, let me say something. It's a question of strategy. I have lived long enough in this country to see people's struggle against military, people who have won those struggles, people who have lost, things that, in retrospect, what we could have done. For the NSAS issue, let me speak my language. There is a saying in Yoruba called Moja Mosa. which means you know when to strike, you know when to retreat, you have a strategy if you want to. We don't, look, it's not every battle that needs to be fought by noise. And what I'm saying is that the fundamentals, right, that has led to the banning of Twitter, that has led to government, for example, treating the answer. See what happened to Abakari now. It's evidence that everything that was being complained about during NSTARS was a fact about the police. If the police had washed itself up during that period, probably we wouldn't, Nigeria wouldn't be under this disgrace by saying our super cop is one of the most corrupt policemen on earth. And the point is this: at some point during NSAS, there was a point when the government came to the negotiating table. For me, the fact that the NSAS movement did not make a strategic retreat at that time to say, okay, now you're on the table, we give you 6 months to do this. You know, that was in itself. Now, it goes with any other battle against a government like this. And the point is this: what I'm saying is that fundamentally, you see, anyone who expects a government who has been 6 years, I know the nature of this president. For crying out loud, I ran against him. I know the nature of this president. He's not likely to change. That's what he was in 1984. You get my point? But I think the strategy, right, has to be a little bit different.
So what, I'm curious, I'm really curious,
Yeah,
what strategy works
yeah,
with Mr. President? Because I like to
it's
work
going to
based
be
on
more,
facts. Just hold on. I remember, I'm sure you remember this
Yeah.
vividly, when the EFCC boss was not confirmed by the National Assembly.
Yes.
What happened? He stayed on because this is what the president wanted. And now
Absolutely.
we have a Twitter ban. What's the guarantee that whatever strategy we have would work on Mr. President? And when I say we, I'm talking about the whole of Nigeria and all the people who use Twitter and those who are worried about the gag of free speech. What strategy do you presume would work on Mr. President, since you seem to know him so well?
Okay, for me, I would design a strategy and personalize it for this Mr. President. You see, because I'm not going to expect this Mr. President to change. My strategy will be to make sure that nobody like this ever gets near government again. You see, what is on trial is the Nigerian institutions, the way we operate, the way we think, the way we engage with ourselves. So what if they unban Twitter? Then everything is right, is that it? You know, so what I'm saying is this: let's keep the ball bouncing concerning Twitter. Let's remind this government from time to time that you said you were going to unban Twitter. You didn't. Keep that story going. But let's go a bit deeper and see some of the things that are connected. Look, since we've been discussing unban Twitter, we've discussed security, we've discussed NSAS. But one thread that is running through it all is the attitude of those who, look, if the president says he's not going to ban it, he's not going to unban it, doesn't mean I'm not going to use Facebook and I'm not going to use other outlets to communicate and even fight that banning of Twitter. I will use it. So I'll take advantage of those for right now. And then I will see the problem beyond Buhari. The problem it has to be beyond Buhari.
Okay.
You see, because there are certain attitudes, and I'll tell you, Buhari himself is why are people asking for a restructuring, a decentralizing right now? And they are spending their time and energy and life on that. Because that is a deep-rooted issue that will affect everything. I'm saying, which one is more important, the root or the stem? We have to ask ourselves fundamental questions. And that's why, but I don't want to be misread as to be belittling, as Nelly rightly said, the symbolism. Because it's a very powerful message.
Okay.
You know.
Well, let me go back to Nelly. Nelly, I want us to quickly just look at the way forward. We're talking about press freedom. I was on a platform and we were talking about press freedom from different parts of the world, and every country had its unique challenges. But when it came to the continent of Africa, the lines seem to be, in fact, it seemed to be very similar across the countries. the governments on the African continent seem to want things to go their way. There is not, I mean, the countries that have free speech, you can count them on one hand, and Africa is a really large continent. So what is that thing that makes us throw up the kinds of people that become our leaders on this continent that at the end of the day decide to sit on us or want to, not let us speak when they're not doing what they promised to do for us? And I'm saying that ditto for, countries like Zimbabwe. We saw what happened in Uganda during the elections. I mean, it just keeps happening. What is it? What is the curse of Africa? Why is it that free speech is something, it's a mirage, and countries are thinking about how to expand free speech in other parts of the world, but we're still talking about, free speech even given the light of day? What do you think the challenge is?
First, I don't think we have a curse of Africa. I think we're just a country, we're a continent that is just newly experiencing freedom. It's a hard concept, and it's a very deep-rooted psychological issue. I mean, it goes beyond just looking at it as politics, and that's why I go back to, what we do for a living. We are, as I said before, media, we're journalists. We need to be able to look at the nuances of every issue that we face as Africans and stop speaking about things as if they're just one track. And we are just on one track looking for, this is a good leader, so that's a bad leader. Or it's never going to work that way, because we are a fusion of so many things. Take a look at us, Nigeria. How old are we? We just became, you could look at it and say 60 years is so many years. Now, I believe in something that I've always said, which is the fact that you're just beginning something that people have done years ago doesn't mean that you have to make the same old mistakes they made. You learn from people's mistakes. However, human beings are complex, and it takes a different understanding and a layer of things for us to understand where we are. So I do not think that Africa is cursed, but I think Africa is still reeling from the admiration of absolute power. Right? Absolute power of your own internal monarchs, absolute power of colonialism. You look at it, you understand it, you know exactly what it means to be favored. And so no matter what you say about it, nobody wants to give up privilege. So all that means is when you're in that so-called position of power, you now have to impose that on people lesser than you, because that's what you truly understand as it is. The idea of leadership, and look at it through everything. The idea of leadership through service is not an African ideology. It's not, and I'm not saying it as a root of us. I'm saying it as a consequence of leadership before us. And so this is a pillaged continent, and we are in our moments of, psychological reborn. And we have to look at even our politics and everything is that. And then when people believe in absolute power, you tell them to give people a right to speak freely, to question the absoluteness of this power that they've worked so hard to get. It's not something easy that people can let go or people can agree with. But it's something that must continually be challenged, because generations pass. Africa is going to come to a point where the generation that saw colonialism, that fought for freedom, or the generation that was able to separate themselves from military rule, will become leaders. Okay. So we have to keep at it. Okay. I want to quickly say this. When he said, NSAS, he spoke about NSAS and how it's being fought. I have to say I agree on one point, that you cannot fight a person with a weapon that they understand. You cannot do that. You cannot speak any differently. If there's anything this government understands, and I mean the government of President Muhammadu Buhari, is riots and protests. He saw it happen when he was a military general. He's seen it happen from, dispensation after dispensation, whether military or democratic. They're threatened by it, they do not understand it, and they have only one way of dealing with it, is violence. So why would we, millennials, Gen Z, and whichever other generation after that chooses to question power, do it the exact same way when we know the results of it? Once again, we need to deal with our issues in a more psychological way. We need to deal with our issues with a true depth of the knowledge of what our issues are and who we are fighting, who we are protesting against. That's the only way we can have any kind of solution. We can't keep talking about our issues like it's a novel, on the surface of it. It's just not going to work.
Great. Thank you very much. And I want to end on that note. Thank you very much. Nelly Kalu is a broadcast journalist. Of course, Shina Fagbinro is a legal practitioner. Really great conversation, guys. Thank you so much for being here.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for staying with us. We'll take a short break now, and when we return, a northern group wants the Afenifere to be proscribed. Another group is not happy about it. So take a listen when we come back.
Nigeria's Niger Delta region, from where the black gold fuels Africa's largest economy, where the lines between wealth and poverty has never been thinner. Conflicts, poverty, insecurity, and environmental challenges daily confront the region. How can the Niger Delta story be changed for the better?
Join Mamude Akuga at 9 p.m. every Friday evening on PlusTvAfrica as he probes deep in search of solutions.
Inside the Niger Delta with Mamude Akuga, the authentic voice of Nigeria's oil-rich region.
Don't concern yourself too much with what others think, because that will slow your own progress down.
If you've not worked in corporate world and you decide to start off your own thing, except you obviously get like the required skills, you definitely would have a lot of glitches along the way.
This my entrepreneurship journey. The greatest problem I have are dedicated staff. You see,
That's
are
a
willing
problem.
to get to the job before the job starts. God forbid they resume at 8. They will literally fall down and die.
There's a lot of entitlement that comes up in marriages, both
But
on
if
the
you're
side
married to me,
of
I'm so
men
entitled
and
to you.
women. No, I'm not saying we're not entitled, and that's the honest truth. But I think that there's a lot of entitlement that sometimes comes in.
Your wife
No,
was there,
no.
she carried your baby, she sacrificed her life, made
I
sacrifices
wouldn't
in the
shred
workplace.
it if this
and
was a man.
Now, you're not telling me 5 years into the marriage, you need a prenup? Guy, check yourself.
There must be a reason for something.
Hello and welcome. It's Nimasa This Week, the voice of maritime. Nimasa This Week is brought to you by the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency. Statutorily mandated to ensure that there's regulation and promotion of matters affecting our waters. NIMASA bears responsibility for search and rescue, shipping development, and ship registration.
NIMASA This Week, the voice of maritime, showing on this channel.
Welcome to The Breakfast.
A breakfast where we unbundle top and big stories of the day.
Is vaccine the only way out of this pandemic?
No, definitely not.
Many Ghanaians just want a peaceful election and they are hoping there will be no rigging.
There is nothing bad in borrowing for infrastructure. The minister added that he was impressed.
Please come and see yourself what we are doing with the money we are borrowing.
It's very important. The way we brand ourselves is the way people will carry us.
It's just the driver of the two vehicles that were completely burned. This one was here screaming.
What do you recommend the government do to support this sector?
Direct intervention, that's what every government all over the world has done.
We are not a parallel security structure. A multiple core is a complementary core.
What I will not encourage Christians to do is to carry dagger and follow anybody. No.
Join us on The Breakfast, 7 a.m., Monday to Friday.
The Southern Nigeria Frontier, SNF, has stated that it would confront the coalition of northern groups if the government fails to take urgent action towards calling the group and its members to order. He stated this while reacting to a recent statement credited to the CNG, where it called for the proscription of the Pan-Yoruba Socio-Political Organization, Afenifere, and its declaration as a terrorist organization by the federal government. It said the statement by the CNG was not only a direct assault on the Yoruba people and the pedigree of Yoruba leaders, and warned that the CNG should not threaten the Yoruba or any region of the southern Nigeria, with war or any form of intimidation. Well, joining us to discuss this is Semaila Musa. He is the Director of Strategy and Communications of CNG, and also joining us is Shola Ibisheni. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thank you.
So, Semaila, I'm going to start with you because your group is being fingered in this press release. Apparently, they are saying that the CNG had insulted the pedigree of the Yoruba nation and, of course, Yoruba people. What exactly did the CNG mean by that statement and asking the government to prescribe Afenifere?
Well, let me just say that I'm only managing to hear you. If you heard me, if you are hearing me.
I will come to you, Mr. Bisheni. I'm going to start with Semaila and then I'll come to you.
Yes, is that what?
I will come to you in a bit. Semaila,
Okay.
You can go ahead.
Okay, I think first and foremost, we need to go to the genesis.
I really can't get you correctly.
Semaila, go ahead.
We need to go back to the genesis of the whole thing. CNG did not just decide to issue a statement. There was a particular statement, credited to the Afenifere that actually prompted CNG to release that statement, because it was something, it's one of the most sensitive, and I say most sensitive not only in Nigeria, in Africa as a whole, one of the most sensitive area in our lives or in our endeavors, the issue of religion. Even the African traditionalist also doesn't want to say anything bad about beliefs, whether God or whatever it is, or, any of the deity. So really, it's something that is inherent in us as Africans, that we actually very religious people. But of course, the way the statement was released, I think the statement, I don't even want to go back into that. It's about, the prophet and all of that. And that became an issue. So many people started raising eyebrows, started, talking about it, that shouldn't have come up in the first place. That why should Afenifere liken Sunday Igboho to the Prophet Muhammad? So, it's something, it's an area really that, over here in Africa, we really don't take lightly. And especially Nigeria. Nigerians are known all over that we are very religious set of people. So really, that's the genesis. Now, coming back to what you said about, the statement released by CNG, that it's now, generated, reactions from the group you mentioned. I want to say this, right? Even though I share a different opinion on that, because I also I know much about the Yoruba people. I've lived in the Southwest, and I know the kind of respect people have for the different religion. You can have a family where you have a Christian, a Muslim, and a traditionalist, and they all live together in peace without having any issue. So really, I don't want us to look at it like pushing them, out of context, really. And that was my stand ab initio when this whole thing started. I think, because I also spoke with some of my friends, in the Southwest, who are also of the opinion that Afenifere did not mean it in a derogatory way, and being that, just their culture in the Southwest. Like a Muslim can actually follow his Christian brother to the church for occasion, the same way a Christian will follow his Muslim brother to the mosque. So there's that that relationship between them, and because of that, they feel there's no way Afenifere will have said that in a very derogatory way. And I want to believe so, because you see, Nigeria is actually at a precipice where any little push can actually, push it over the other side, and that's what we don't want to happen, because the area of religion is one of the things that can actually give the most volatile thing in the northern Nigeria that can trigger off any kind of violence is actually the issue of religion. And that's why, I always like people to just stay on their lane when talking about another person's religion, because over here, that understanding is not really that much.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you on the issue of, the statement and what it depicts. But let me go to Mr. Ebisheni. Mr. Ebisheni, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. I can hear you. But,
perfect.
I'm not sure we got.
Yeah, if you can hear me, I'm going to push my question. If you can just listen. So, Samaila is saying that the reason why this conversation has even gotten to where it has gotten to is that the Afenifere had brought a religious perspective to the issue of politics or the issue of insecurity. Why did Afenifere decide to toe that line? Although he's also making the excuse that...
Which line precisely?
Well, the description or the comparison of Sunday Igboho to the Prophet Muhammad.
Sunday Igboho, as far as I'm concerned, and Afenifere is concerned, are on the same page on the issue of the defense of the interest of the Yoruba people. Initially, our position was that Nigeria could still be redeemed, and for that reason, we were calling for restructuring of the Nigerian state to reinvent the foundational federalism principles of which the founding fathers of Nigeria fought. Now, it got to a stage where Afenifere realized that the call for restructuring is no longer fashionable. We do not need to come out to begin to say things differently from what we found out that the majority of Yorubas are written from. I can tell you that there is no organization, no other organization is as protective of the interests of Sunday Igboho than Afenifere today. But that is just the much that one can say because of the sensitive nature of the issue for now. But I can't tell you today that Afenifere realized that Nigerians, majority of the Yorubas, overwhelming majority of the Yorubas, are on the same page with Igboho, because
I'm sorry, Mr. Bishani, when did you take that poll? Because I have interviewed many people who are from the Yoruba nation, and they have never supported the idea of Sunday Igboho. Some of them have said that they do not agree with his style and the way he's going about things. But when you say majority, that means you have your statistics. Did you conduct a poll of sorts to find out that most Yoruba people are in support of Sunday Igboho? I think we lost you, but I'm going to come back to you, Samaila, because we almost are running out of time. To douse this tension, because there seems to be a clash of interest, and of course, sensitive words are being thrown around, and we are at a point in our country where everything is in a fragile state. How do we douse this tension? Because I wanted to ask you earlier on, you are the head of communications, you are in charge of communications, and I'm guessing that when that first statement was released, you would have read it and vetted it, but then you're saying in one breath that you do not somewhat agree, that you hold a different opinion as to what was being sent out in that statement. I'm the director of strategy and program for the coalition.
right?
Okay.
So yeah, you know, there's a spokesperson who, different from my own, but I mean, retrospective and planning. Program. There's not anything going on there that my hand is not in it. So I'm not, I'm absorbing myself from that. But I'm just saying on a general note, I mean, my opinion might be different from what the group can call. You understand? So, but what I'm saying in essence, I mean, back to your question, I just tried that, sorry for that digression, is that going forward, right, is that people can make agitation. You understand? Yeah, and over time, CNG has come forth to even, I mean, we've even gone to court to say, look, if the Igbos want to secede, why not? You understand? And we have been calling for that the federal government is to look into that. They want to leave, let there be a referendum. You understand? If that's the opinion of the majority of the Igbo people, why not? If the Yorubas want to leave, call for a referendum. You understand? So there's a way to go about it, but not the violent way. We saw how Nnamdi Kanu went about killing people, killing innocent people.
I'm sorry, Samaila, hold on. Where have you seen Nnamdi Kanu killing people? I'm sorry.
No, you see, this is the point. When you like, if
have you seen Nnamdi Kanu kill anyone? Because you just said that on national TV.
You asked me a question, and I need to answer you, right?
Yes, please.
You answer. So the answer is this: over time, we have so many audios where he's given order that they should kill. That even when they give an order for sit at home, that whoever goes out there, whatever happens to him, has his own parents. So really, you don't need to come out with arms. If I'm a politician and I give my followers instruction to go kill, and after they have maimed and killed people.
But Nnamdi Kanu is not a politician, is he?
I'm just giving you an example. He is a leader of IPOD. And if he gave IPOD instruction, including ESN, give them instruction on what to do, when they carry it out, he needs to be responsible for it. That's the way it works. You don't go to the law court and say, oh, yeah, of course I gave order, but they are not little kids. They have the right to disobey my order. No, you're going down for it. That's the way it works.
Okay.
You understand? So you can't do. That's why we need to be careful about our utterances. Things that even, goes as far as taking human beings' life. Many police officers.
I guess when you say we all have to be careful about our utterances, you mean the CNG, Afenifere, every single person, because everybody here
because
in
you
this
need to be
particular
responsible
matter,
for whatever
everybody had said things that were too insensitive, and that's why we're here having this conversation. But unfortunately, time is not on our side, and I have to say thank you, Samaila Musa, for being here, and of course, Sholai Bisheni, who we lost because of bad connection. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
Okay, you're welcome. Sorry.
Well, thank you all for staying with us. We have to go now because time is no longer on our side. I'm Mariana Kun. I'll see you tomorrow on Plus Politics. Have a good evening.